Taking the family photo at international gatherings is a diplomatic tradition. Each leader has their own place. Everyone stands shoulder to shoulder. An appropriate gesture at the African Union leaders meeting in Addis Ababa, where there have been other signs of cooperation worth marking. Morocco, the only African nation outside the AU, was readmitted after a 33-year absence. The kingdom had withdrawn from the group's predecessor after the disputed territory of Western Sahara was recognised as an independent member. West African states were applauded for their role in helping the Gambia's democratically elected president, Adama Barrow, take office, and for preventing violence in the nation. And a new commission chairman, Chad's foreign minister, Moussa Faki Mahamet, was elected to head the bloc for the next 4 years.
Moi-même, formé dans cette école, je crois en l'Afrique et je mettrai toutes mes connaissances, toutes mes forces au service de ce continent. C'est ce que je veux dire.
One of his first major tasks will be to strengthen the group's solidarity, so the AU can play a more decisive role in peace and security for the 1.2 billion people it now represents. South Africa's Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was the first woman to head the AU. She's recognised for boosting gender equality and for helping to create a 50-year vision called Agenda 2063 for the Africa we want. But she's been criticised for not pushing hard enough for the AU to be more self-sufficient. About 70% of its budget is funded by outside donors, like the European Union, the US, China and Turkey. However, she's been most heavily criticised for her leadership on peace and security, particularly in Burundi and South Sudan. The AU had threatened to deploy a peacekeeping force to Burundi in 2015, when a political crisis surrounding President Pierre Nkurunziza's controversial re-election led to the deaths of at least 400 people. But it never happened. And that set a precedent for the AU's response to violence in South Sudan. In 2016, the AU developed a plan to send peacekeepers to the new nation with a broader mandate than current UN forces stationed there. No AU mission has been sent. In a joint statement with the UN and regional body the IGAD, the African Union expressed deep concerns over the continuing spread of fighting and risk of intercommunal violence escalating into mass atrocities. But will the new chairman be able to address these crises any differently than his predecessor? Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Stephen Chan. He's a professor of international relations at the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. He's been recognized by the British government for his services to Africa and higher education. And from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, journalist Louw-Vaudran. She's an Africa analyst and consultant at the Institute for Security Studies. Thanks so much, both of you, for joining us. Stephen Chan, let's look back before we look forward. Some people not too happy with Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. There was a write-up in Pambazuka. Now, granted, Pambazuka's Pan-African, quite far left, but there was basically a good riddance write-up in that particular publication. Was that fair?
I think that it made its point very, very concisely and precisely. I think that it was very fair in terms of its criticisms. I think it was unfair in not pointing out some of the positive things that she had done. But in fact, in its long list of things that she had not done, I'm afraid that article was very, very accurate.
So, Liesl, where did she get it so wrong?
I think on many levels. She is a politician, a well-known politician in South Africa. I followed her throughout her career, and especially as foreign minister and Thabo Mbeki, and then Home Affairs Minister in South Africa. There were high expectations that she would actually make changes not only to the AU Commission, structural changes, but also be a strong leader, because she had a very good reputation in South Africa, and she is still today one of the favorites to take over from her ex-husband Jacob Zuma in South Africa. She got it wrong, I think, by wanting to focus too much on long-term developmental issues, Agenda 2063, trying to be everything to everyone, economic development, women's rights. She didn't really do much on the issues of peace and security, mediation in crisis, upholding democracy, which is what people on the continent are concerned about first and foremost. So the current issues, the burning issues on the continent, she completely almost ignored and wanted to focus on more long-term things. But 4 years is really not a long time to make a huge impact on a continent and on countries with such enormous challenges as we know.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, interesting point there, peace and security perhaps being a weak point of Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's time at the helm, and now we're seeing that her successors saying that's going to be at the forefront. Was she embarrassed by the fact that the AU was almost sidelined and the likes of ECOWAS took the lead when it came to resolving situations like the Gambia, Stephen?
Well, she should be embarrassed because indeed there have been many, many huge security issues sweeping across Africa, particularly across the Sahelian region and West Africa, of course. And of course, the states in that region, the new chair of the commission, of course, comes from one of those affected countries and appreciates only too well the volatility of the region. I'm afraid that Mrs. Dlamini-Zuma went absent without leave on these critical issues, and not just those security issues. If we're going to concede she tried to make some effort in terms of long-term development goals, then where was she in terms of developmental emergencies, like Ebola, for instance? And where was she on one of the great 21st century catastrophes, and that is the huge exodus of African refugees to Europe? She was completely invisible on all of these major humanitarian issues, as well as on the security issues.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'm going to use some of these and hopefully get an interview with her in the not too distant future, because it'll be interesting to hear her answer to and answer for some of these. Let's look at Moussa Faki Mahamet now. So, Foreign Minister of Chad, former Prime Minister, Liesl, what is he good at?
I think precisely he would be good at a hands-on approach when it came to fighting Boko Haram, for example. He's from Chad. Idris Deby, his president, has positioned himself in the last couple of years as the champion of peacekeeping operations. Chad sent thousands of troops to Mali to fight the jihadists in 2013, together with the French, of course. And N'Djamena is the capital of the multinational force against Boko Haram. It also hosts the French Operation Barkhane. So really, peace and security issues are I think, what Moussa Faki Mahamet will do well. He would probably be much more of a pragmatist than Dlamini-Zuma ever was. As I said, I think she looked at it from an ideological point of view, looking at all these long-term strategies. But he is also well known within the AU. He's worked at the AU Commission on the Economic and Cultural Social Council, ECOSOC. He chaired many of the meetings last year because Idris Deby was chairing the AU. So he was chairing, for example, the Executive Council of Ministers during this session, this 28th AU Summit. So he would also know what the issues are, the urgent issues, to actually make the AU a more effective organization.
Right. Stephen, when Moussa Faki Mahamet said, the sound of guns will be drowned out by cultural songs and rumbling factories, that sounded a little bit like the pie in the sky that we heard from his predecessor, didn't it?
That is pie in the sky, but I do agree that he'll be far more focused on security issues. He is a heavyweight in terms of his experience within the AU and the associated agencies and bodies in Addis Ababa. He knows his way around, but I think something that we often overlook is that he brings to the position a certain technocratic expertise. His very opening speech to the African Union Summit, for instance, lamented the lack of speed of the internet, of the email services within the African Union. something that Mrs. Dlamini-Zuma never could appreciate, because as far as I know, she's not very good at modern communications. So he brings a modernity, a technocracy, which I think is going to be extremely important in terms of being able to mobilize peacekeeping and security issues, try to mobilize forces to combat insurgency. You can't go slow on those things. So rapid mobilization, he would bring an understanding of exactly how to go about something that is very easy to say, rapid mobilization, but which in the African continental sense is extremely hard to accomplish.
Couple more things I want to get through. Liesl, first with you. Morocco back in the fold. Is that good for the continent? And is it maybe does it sound the death knell for any hopes that Western Sahara had of independence?
Well, in one sense, it was a small victory for the Western Sahara, because for the first time Morocco and King Mohammed VI was actually willing to sit in an international forum like the AU together with the representative of the Sahrawi Republic. But in the long run, it is, I think Morocco has shown that it wants desperately to be back in the AU. King Mohammed VI went around the continent on a roadshow these last couple of months, and has also made investments or promised deals and bilateral relations with countries like Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Rwanda, for example. It seemed, from what I heard from his speech yesterday, almost personal to Mohammed VI. I sat in the hall and saw him walking in and waving. Not everybody clapped when he came in because it was so divisive, but he said, I am very happy to be back in my home and back in with my family, and I missed you. And so it sounds like it was a personal thing almost for Mohammed VI. And on the long run, the suspicion is that Morocco will try and get the Sahrawi Republic suspended from the AU, but that is definitely going to be very, very difficult at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Final question for you, Professor Stephen Chan. We have a world of sort of globalism turning towards nationalism, regionalism turning towards these countries sort of recoiling among themselves. We've had Brexit, we've got a US cutting itself off in many ways from the rest of the world. How do those patterns translate to what's happening with the EU? Is Africa going to be seeing the same thing going on?
I think, in fact, Africa will realize that as the rest of the world is looking to its own internal affairs, Africa needs more than ever to have some sense of unity. So if this is not the moment when African unity is put first and foremost on the agenda, then I think Africa as a continent is going to have a sorry future. The world is indeed going through a very, very difficult time. Africa is experiencing many problems, but with modern communications and modern possibilities for cooperation, it's never been a better time to try to get an act together, to try to be united, to try to help one another in the continent. I do think that the new chairperson of the Commission is well placed to attempt this, but he also has to have the cooperation of the different heads of state, the different heads of government, and not all of them seem to have a very modern outlook or a modern appreciation of today's real world.
Stephen Chan, Louw-Vaudran, it's been thought-provoking. Thank you very much for joining us.